Servant leadership is a philosophy based on the importance of serving others. It is ethical, practical, and meaningful. It is ethical because it is about serving people, not using people. It is practical because servant leaders get results. It is meaningful because it is about helping your colleagues grow so that your organization can be of greater service and make a positive impact on society.
Robert Greenleaf knew that leadership can make a difference in our organizations and our society. Greenleaf worked for AT&T, where he was the Director of Management Research. It was his job to educate and train the leaders and managers of AT&T to be as effective as possible. He concluded after 38 years of experience that the most effective leaders and managers were those who were not focused on their own power and wealth, but rather were focused on serving their colleagues and customers. In 1970, Greenleaf launched the modern servant leadership movement with his classic essay, The Servant as Leader. It was in that essay that he coined the words servant leader and servant leadership.
And it probably starts with listening as a practice.
Isabel Lopez was for many years a business manager. She is now a leadership consultant and an author sharing the insights of Robert Greenleaf.
People all over the world understand the importance of serving others. The idea actually goes back centuries, crosses cultures and religions. Robert Greenleaf brought this idea into the world of our large, modern organizations. The core message is that servant leaders are driven by a desire to serve. And then, by conscious choice, that person chooses to lead. The test that Greenleaf laid out is, do those served, while being served, become healthier, wiser, freer, more autonomous, and themselves then more apt to serve? And further, do they not harm the least advantaged among us? His vision was that servant leaders would transform organizations into institutions that would not only offer creative opportunities, but that they would also create a more just and caring society.
While training and educating the leaders of AT&T, Greenleaf was in touch with noted management experts of his day, such as Peter Drucker and Douglas McGregor. McGregor was the author of an influential book titled The Human Side of Enterprise, in which he described Theory X and Theory Y. Theory X assumes that most people don't like work and will avoid it if they can. They don't want to be responsible and they have little ambition. Theory Y is much more positive. Theory Y assumes that people are willing to work. They are willing to accept responsibility and will exercise creativity in solving organizational problems. Dr. Kent Keith is a speaker and author who has served as the CEO of the Greenleaf Center established by Robert Greenleaf in 1964. He explains how Greenleaf went beyond Theory X and Theory Y.
Most people are willing to accept responsibility, and a lot of people have the capacity to exercise their imagination, ingenuity, and creativity in solving organizational problems. But here's the key point. According to McGregor, under the conditions of modern industrial life, the intellectual potential of most people is only being partially utilized. So Greenleaf took the next obvious step. If people are willing to work, but only part of their potential is being used, why don't we help them grow so they can use all of their potential? That's good for the individual because the individual gets to grow. When the capacity of the individual grows, the capacity of the organization grows, so it's good for the organization. The organization can do things better or do things it's never done before. And that's good for the organization's customers or clients or patients or members because the organization can serve them better. So it's a triple win, a win for the individual, the organization, and the customer.
In the early 1970s, when Greenleaf wrote his first essay, Jack Lowe Sr. got a copy. Lowe was president of Texas Distributors, a company that is today known as TD Industries, a successful air conditioning and specialty construction company headquartered in Dallas. It has been on the Fortune magazine list of the 100 best places to work in America every year since the list was started. Fortune magazine has placed TD Industries in its Hall of Fame. Jack Lowe Jr. succeeded his father as chairman and CEO in the 1980s.
In the early 70s, Dad had come across Greenleaf's first essay, and he shared it with the employees of our company, which we call partners. He brought people together in groups of about 15 for all-day meetings. This wasn't the only thing they discussed, but it was one of them. Mother fixed spaghetti lunch every time for 2 years. They talked about what kind of company we wanted to have, what their values would be, how they wanted to be led, and how they wanted to lead. Out of those conversations, servant leadership became a core part of our company culture. Today, we say that you have to produce the results for which you're responsible in your job, and you also have to be a servant leader, by which we mean help those around you grow. If you can't be pretty good at both, producing the results and being a servant leader, you can't work at TD Industries for the long term. We'll help you with both, but you got to be good at both of them, and both are equally important to us.
Do you think there's a way to tie our sponsors into some of this volunteer opportunity?
Servant leadership is about getting results. Over the years, well-known companies like Southwest Airlines, Starbucks, The Container Store, Men's Warehouse, The Toro Company, PPC Partners, First Fruits, Aflac, and Synovus Financial have implemented servant leadership principles. Kelvin Redd worked at Synovus Financial and now heads up a servant leadership center in Columbus, Georgia.
I worked at Synovus Financial back in the late 1990s when Fortune magazine listed it as the #1 best place to work in America. That was no accident. People there were implementing servant leadership. And servant leadership works. It's very practical. There are things that servant leaders do that make them effective. For example, they're good at listening. They listen to their colleagues so they can figure out what their colleagues need to be effective and perform at their highest possible levels. They listen to customers so they know what customers want and can provide it to them. That makes customers happy. Servant leaders develop people, coach and mentor them, and then give them freedom to make their own decisions. Servant leaders also exercise foresight. They study the trends so they have a good idea of what they need to do to continue serving. They lead. They don't just react. They get out in front of the curve.
Dr. Ann McGee-Cooper knew Robert Greenleaf and interacted with him while she was learning about servant leadership in the late 1980s. She has been helping companies implement servant leadership principles ever since.
One thing I think is unique about servant leadership is that it's not a single style of leadership. It's about identifying and meeting the needs of the organization, its team members, and the people the organization serves. The servant leader uses whatever style is needed in each situation and with each person she or he is leading. In an emergency, the servant leader may need to issue orders to save lives. Yet, in another situation, the servant leader may just need to make suggestions or offer options. And some colleagues need more direction while others need less. The servant leader adjusts her or his leadership to meet the needs of others. That's another way of saying that it's not about the leader, it's about those being served.
Scholarly research is now becoming available on the impacts of servant leadership in the workplace. Dr. Bob Liden is a professor of management at the University of Illinois at Chicago. He and his colleagues conduct research on servant leadership.
We are still at an early stage in the research, but the results are consistently showing that servant leadership positively impacts the workplace in a number of ways. For example, servant leaders excel at building and facilitating teams. They create work environments that encourage people to pitch in and help out. Employees who are led by servant leaders have enhanced job performance, greater commitment, and report greater job satisfaction. Employees led by servant leaders are more creative because they have greater trust in their leaders. A recent study shows that servant leadership benefits the bottom line of organizations, as CEO servant leadership was found to be positively related to firm performance.
Servant leadership works when times are tough. An example is the closure of the Delphi brake assembly operations in Dayton, Ohio. The employees were told in 2006 that the plant would close in 2 years. When the announcement was made, many people left, so a new workforce had to be hired and trained. they had to perform at the highest possible levels, knowing that they would all be losing their jobs. Mary Miller was a human resources manager for the Delphi brake assembly operations during the 2-year shutdown process.
We faced so many challenges that it was hard to know what to do. What we did was implement some basic principles of servant leadership. We listened more than we talked. We asked employees what they needed. We set aside time for foresight and planning, and we focused on helping people to grow. We sat down with all our colleagues and developed individual plans that would help them get the experience or training or education that they would need to get their next job. The results were outstanding. We became one of the safest manufacturing operations in America. Our defect rate was single-digit parts per million. Our on-time delivery was 99.5%, and our financial performance was the best it had been in decades. On our last day, when the operations closed, we were the best we had ever been. Servant leadership was the reason.
What is the future of servant leadership? There are many factors, but in the end, the future may be promising because new generations want to work for servant leaders.
I think a lot of younger people want more than the traditional idea of success.
We want to work for an organization that's committed to making a difference in the lives of others.
An organization that is ethical, practical, and provides its employees with meaningful work.
That's the kind of organization I want to work for.
An organization that's committed to servant leadership.
That's the kind of company that I'd love to be a part of.